In the 1930s, a mother fed her teenage daughter stimulants so a studio could squeeze 60-hour weeks from a child. Decades later, a 13-year-old entered rehab while another sued his own parents for millions they had stolen. From Judy Garland to Macaulay Culkin, these are not isolated tragedies. They are a pattern of stars raised by nightmare parents, and the laws written to stop it are still failing. Judy Garland's Hollywood career began under the joint authority of her mother, Ethel Gum, and the MGM studio system. At 13, Garland signed a juvenile contract that placed her under strict supervision. Studio call sheets and payroll logs from the late 1930s show her working 60-hour weeks, often in violation of child labor laws. MGM memos detail calorie restrictions and daily weigh-ins, with Ethel Gum enforcing every rule and reporting any deviation to producers. Garland's schedule left little room for rest. Her mother's role blurred the line between maternal care and corporate control. She monitored Judy's diet, behavior, and attendance, ensuring her daughter never missed a rehearsal, no matter the hour. To keep her performing, both the studio and her mother reportedly relied on pharmaceuticals. Interviews and Garland's own recollections describe a routine of amphetamines to stay alert for double shifts and barbiturates at night to force sleep. Pills became as much a part of her workday as costumes and rehearsals. In a 1957 interview, Garland remembered being given medication to stay awake, saying, "I never asked for it. It was just part of the job." Garland's later letters and interviews return to the exhaustion and sense of entrapment her health sacrificed to meet the demands of both family and studio. Brooke Shields entered the entertainment world before she could walk, appearing in advertisements as an infant under the careful direction of her mother, Terry Shields. By age 9, Brooke's image and career were governed by a management contract signed in 1975, granting Terry exclusive control over her daughter's modeling, endorsements, and film roles. The contract included a clause assigning all rights to Brooke's likeness and name to her mother for the duration of her childhood career. In the years that followed, Brooke became the face of controversial ad campaigns, including a provocative Calvin Klein jeans commercial that aired when she was 15. Earlier, at just 12, she starred in the film Pretty Baby, which drew international criticism for its depiction of a child in adult situations. Throughout these years, decisions about her public image, roles, and even the boundaries of her consent were managed by her mother, often with little input from Brooke herself. Legal disputes surfaced in the 1990s when Brooke, then in her late 20s, challenged the long-standing management agreement and the use of her image in early advertisements. Court filings from this period reveal a battle over whether a minor can truly give informed consent to commercial exploitation. The case settled confidentially in 1997, but the public record shows that Brooke gained control over her image rights and a portion of the earnings previously managed by her mother. The Shields story exposes how commercializing a child's image can blur ethical lines, leaving questions about autonomy and protection unresolved. Drew Barrymore's childhood unfolded in the glare of Hollywood, but her earliest years were shaped less by film sets than by the world her mother, Jade Barrymore, introduced her to after hours. By the time Drew was 9, her name was already attached to blockbuster credits, but home life offered little protection from the adult world. Public records and memoir excerpts describe nights spent at Los Angeles clubs, where Drew was a regular guest before reaching her teens. The boundaries that normally separate childhood from adult nightlife simply did not exist for her. By age 13, Drew entered a rehabilitation program for substance abuse. Tabloid headlines chronicled her intake, but court documents and later interviews reveal a deeper reality. Her mother's permissiveness, combined with the absence of stable guardianship, left Drew responsible for her own safety, long before most children are expected to navigate such choices. The Los Angeles County Emancipation Decree, filed in 1989, granted Drew legal independence at 14. The court order cited her need to bypass child labor restrictions and take control of her own welfare. Drew's memoir, published at 20, recalls the relief and loneliness that followed. Emancipation brought freedom from her mother's authority, but it also forced maturity. In later years, Drew rebuilt her career on her own terms, frequently referencing the lessons learned from surviving a childhood where no adult drew the line between guidance and neglect. Her story stands as a rare example of legal self-defense in a system that too often leaves children without recourse. Gary Coleman's rise on Different Strokes brought both fame and a fortune that, on paper, should have secured his future. By the time he was 18 years old, Coleman's earnings from the show and related endorsements totaled several $1 million. His parents, Edna and Willie Coleman, along with a business advisor, were responsible for managing these funds. Court records from Los Angeles County filed in 1991 reveal a different reality. Coleman discovered that much of his money had vanished, spent, or redirected without his knowledge or consent. The trust meant to safeguard his earnings had been routinely accessed, leaving his accounts nearly empty. In response, Coleman filed a lawsuit against his parents and former advisor, alleging misappropriation of approximately $1.3 million. The court agreed, awarding him $1.3 million in 1993. Despite this legal victory, the financial damage proved lasting. Bankruptcy filings from 1999 show that Coleman's assets had dwindled to the point of insolvency, with medical bills and legal fees compounding his losses. The judgment recovered only a fraction of what had been earned and lost. Coleman's experience became a public example of how even high-profile child stars, protected by contracts and trusts, could still fall victim to financial exploitation by those closest to them. His case underscored the need for stricter legal safeguards to ensure that a child's earnings remain under their control, not at risk from parental mismanagement. Macaulay Culkin's story reached a turning point in the mid-1990s when his parents' relationship collapsed and a custody battle over their son and his fortune began. Court filings from New York's Family Division show that both Kit and Patricia Culkin sought control over the trust holding Macaulay's estimated $15 million in earnings from Home Alone and other projects. Kit Culkin, who had managed Macaulay's career since childhood, argued for sole custody and full authority over his son's professional obligations, citing his own track record as manager. Patricia filed her own petition, countering that Kit's management had crossed into coercion and that Macaulay's emotional well-being was at risk under his father's control. The legal proceedings quickly became about more than just money. As the case unfolded, the court appointed a guardian ad litem to review the financial arrangements and the family's living situation. Public records from 1997 confirm that the judge ultimately split custody, but required all withdrawals from Macaulay's trust to be court-approved and supervised by an independent fiduciary. In interviews years later, Macaulay described the experience as alienating, saying that the fight over his earnings left him estranged from both parents. He has spoken openly about the emotional fallout, recalling that he felt more like a commodity than a child. By his late teens, Macaulay had publicly distanced himself from his family, managing his own affairs and rarely speaking to his father. The custody battle, played out in courtrooms and headlines, exposed the deep personal cost of treating a child's career as a family business. Leighton Meester's legal battle with her mother in 2011 exposed the vulnerabilities that persist for child performers, even decades after the passage of the Coogan Law. The complaint filed in Los Angeles County accused Constance Meester of diverting funds set aside for Leighton's younger brother's medical care. Bank records attached to the suit detailed how earnings from Leighton's acting and modeling work, including early Gossip Girl paychecks, were mixed into family accounts and allegedly spent on personal expenses, such as cosmetic procedures. The amount in dispute reached approximately $45,000. While the court docket confirms the seriousness of the allegations, the case ended in a confidential settlement with no public accounting of how the money was ultimately handled. This dispute highlights a persistent gap in legal protections. The Coogan Act, enacted in California in 1939 after Jackie Coogan's parents spent his entire fortune, requires that 15% of a minor's earnings be placed in a trust until adulthood. The law was a direct response to Coogan's experience. His $3.5 million in silent-era wages had vanished by the time he reached legal age. But the statute protects only a fraction of a child's income, and enforcement depends on parental compliance and accurate reporting. In Meester's case, as in Gary Coleman's and Macaulay Culkin's before her, funds outside the mandated trust remained vulnerable to misuse. Modern earnings further complicate oversight. Proposed amendments in California aim to extend Coogan-style protections to child influencers and digital creators. But as of 2026, none have become law. Bills such as Assembly Bill 2679 and Senate Bill 1241 call for broader definitions and higher trust percentages. Yet the original 15% rule remains the standard. These statutory gaps mean that, even today, young performers and their families must navigate a system where legal safeguards can be circumvented, settlements are often sealed, and the line between parental support and exploitation remains dangerously thin. Even with laws like the Coogan Act, over $3 billion in child performer earnings remain vulnerable to misuse today. Parental control in show business still blurs into exploitation. Until real oversight matches ambition, the next generation faces the same risks. Childhoods are traded for careers, and innocence is weighed against profit. Decades before Hollywood's child stars became symbols of innocence, secret contracts turned them into financial assets, signed away by the people who were supposed to protect them. The studios sold smiling faces, while behind the scenes, parents pushed their children into dangerous stunts, forced medications, and lives controlled by signatures, not love. If the world only saw glamour, what did these children endure in private, and who enabled it? Hollywood's public image machine worked overtime during the Golden Age, churning out glossy photos of child stars surrounded by adoring parents and studio executives. These images appeared everywhere, in magazines, newspapers, and theater lobbies, selling a fantasy of safe, happy childhoods under the studio's watchful eye. But behind the scenes, the real power rested in legal contracts and parental signatures. Studios required that all employment agreements for minors be signed by a parent or guardian, since children could not legally bind themselves. Standard contract language from the 1930s was explicit. All wages and bonuses were paid directly to the parent for the use and benefit of the minor, with no requirement that any portion be set aside for the child's future. These documents gave parents near total control, not just over money, but over schedules, appearances, and even medical decisions. In effect, the child became both a commodity and an asset, with the parent serving as manager, chaperone, and sole financial authority. Studios preferred this arrangement because it streamlined negotiations and limited their own liability. Publicity departments staged elaborate photo sessions showing children like Shirley Temple and Jackie Coogan in playful, wholesome settings, while the paperwork behind those smiles told a different story. The legal system offered little protection. Judges routinely approved contracts without questioning how earnings would be handled, and early California law allowed parents to spend their children's wages as they saw fit. The result was a framework where the promise of stardom came bundled with the risk of total exploitation, all hidden behind the polished veneer of Hollywood's golden age. Ethel Gumb's presence was felt in every detail of Judy Garland's young life, but nowhere more than in the studio hospital records and pharmacy invoices that tracked her daughter's daily routine. Starting in 1935, shipments of amphetamines and barbiturates began arriving at the MGM in-house dispensary, billed directly to the studio medical account. The drugs were not prescribed for illness. They were used to keep Judy energetic for marathon shoots, and then to force her to sleep when filming ended. A July 1938 internal memo from MGM medical staff said that Mrs. Gumb's demands were unrelenting, and there was urgent need to assess medical risk to Judy because her mother insisted on additional doses. The studio doctor warned that he was reluctant to increase dosages, but he faced mounting pressure from Ethel Gumb, who refused to accept anything less than perfection from her daughter. Pharmacy invoices from this period show a steady pattern. Amphetamines dispensed before dawn call times, barbiturates signed out at night, all under Ethel Gumb's signature or supervision. Garland's own private writings, later discovered among her effects, describe being handed pills by her mother before she could recite lines or eat breakfast. Garland wrote that her mother chose the men she dated, the clothes she wore, the food she ate, and the pills she swallowed. The physical toll was swift. Weight fluctuations, exhaustion, and a mounting dependency would haunt Garland for decades. The records make clear that chemical control was not an accident or a studio-only policy. It was enforced at home by her mother with the full knowledge of MGM medical staff. In 1948, a 9-year-old Natalie Wood stood on a rain-soaked bridge set for the film The Green Promise. The production call sheet, later referenced by biographers and archived at UCLA, listed her name for the day's most dangerous shot, a real bridge collapse over a surging artificial flood. Studio safety officers raised concerns and urged that a stunt double should take her place. But Maria Gerdine, Natalie's mother, refused. According to an RKO internal memo, she insisted Natalie perform the stunt as written, dismissing warnings from both crew and studio. When the cameras rolled, the bridge gave way beneath Natalie's feet. She was swept into the water, her cries drowned out by the sound of rushing floodwaters and collapsing timbers. The aftermath was immediate. Natalie surfaced injured and terrified, her ankle badly hurt. Crew members pulled her from the current, but the damage lingered. The incident left her with a lifelong fear of water, an aquaphobia so severe it was noted in later medical records and interviews. The studio's safety report documented the event, but no action was taken against Maria. Instead, the call sheet, with its refusal to allow a stand-in, became a silent witness to the risks forced on a child for the sake of a convincing shot. Natalie's trauma would echo through her adult life, a reminder of how parental authority on set could override even the most basic standards of safety. The bridge collapse was not an accident of circumstance, but a direct result of a mother's decision to place career above her daughter's well-being. Jackie Coogan's face was everywhere in the early 1920s, on movie posters, candy wrappers, and lunchboxes. By the time he turned 21, his earnings totaled nearly $4 million, a fortune managed entirely by his mother, Lillian Coogan, and his stepfather, Arthur Bernstein. But when Jackie reached adulthood and asked for his share, he found the money gone. Court filings from 1938 and 1939 laid out the facts. The family's Brentwood estate, diamond jewelry, fur coats, and lavish parties had all been paid for with Jackie's wages. In open court, his mother insisted that the income of a child belongs to the parents. The judge's ledger summary was blunt. Almost nothing remained for Jackie himself. Public outrage followed every headline. Newspapers ran stories with titles like, "Mother Leaves Coogan Broke, Where Did the Money Go?" And the California legislature took notice. In 1939, lawmakers passed a statute that changed the rules for child performers forever. The Coogan Act required that 15% of a child actor's gross earnings be placed in a trust account protected from parental access until adulthood. The law made it clear the earnings of minor children shall be the property of such minor children and not the property of such parents or guardian. For the first time, Hollywood's youngest workers had a legal claim to their own wages. Jackie's loss became the one case where a child, star's suffering, forced the system to change. In January 1944, Frances Farmer arrived at Western State Hospital in Washington under a court order signed by her mother, Lillian Farmer. The hospital admission form, filed as Record A-243, listed Lillian as the petitioner, citing Frances's supposed inability to care for herself. Frances, then in her late 20s, was not given a choice. The law allowed a parent's word to outweigh her own, even as an adult. Inside the institution, Frances managed to smuggle out a letter. In it she wrote, "Mother has power in this place, power to erase me." The handwriting was shaky, the message clear. Her life and freedom were no longer her own. Hospital records show that Lillian maintained legal control over Frances's estate, authorizing treatments and managing her daughter's finances from the outside. The betrayal was not hidden. It was written into every page of the commitment paperwork. For Frances, the signature on the form was more than legal consent. It was a mother's decision to silence her daughter, using the system as her instrument. Vera Palmer entered her daughter Jane Mansfield in beauty pageants before Jane reached her teens, filling out entry forms from 1945 onward and investing heavily in coaching and costumes. Local news clippings from 1946 describe Jane as a constant presence on the circuit, always accompanied by her mother. Early modeling contracts listed Vera as the sole signatory, with all payments routed through her hands. Years later, Mansfield's televised interviews revealed the cost. "I spent my life performing, never for myself, never for childhood." Shirley Temple's childhood played out under the tight control of her parents, who managed every contract and appearance. Fox Studio payroll ledgers from the 1930s show her earnings peaking at $3 million. Yet decades later, court records reveal that most of this fortune had vanished into family accounts and real estate. In her memoir, Temple recalled collapsing from exhaustion at the breakfast table, only to be propped up and sent back to set. Studios protected their profits with carefully worded contracts and internal policies. A 1937 MGM legal memo outlined indemnity clauses, ensuring the company faced no liability for exhaustion or injuries so long as a parent signed off. The system was designed to keep the money flowing upward, shield the studio from blame, and leave the children with little recourse. Each case, Mansfield, Temple, and countless others, fit into a pattern: grooming, siphoning, and corporate cover, all documented in the paperwork Hollywood tried to keep hidden. Even today, child performers remain at risk. Coogan law protections exist, but financial and emotional abuse still surface in headlines and courtrooms. The true cost of fame is not just history. It is a warning written into every new contract. Childhood in Hollywood is never just make-believe. Share your thoughts below.
You know the stars. You know their films. What you probably never heard is how many of them grew up under parents who pushed, manipulated, or controlled them in ways that would make any modern studio panic. Baby Peggy's vanished fortune. In early 1921, a toddler walked onto a Hollywood set and paid for her parents' next house. Her name on the posters was Baby Peggy. On paper, she was one of the biggest child stars of the silent era. In real life, she was a small kid working adult hours so her family could live large. Studios loved her. She made comedies, melodramas, and even did stage tours across the country. Reporters wrote about her cute face and serious work ethic. What they did not see was how much risk sat behind the camera. She performed stunts around animals, explosions, and open flames with almost no safety rules. If a scene looked dangerous, she still did it because her parents said yes. Every contract, every paycheck, every product deal went through her father. Her mother handled her schedule, costumes, and travel. The adults decided where the money went. The girl who earned it did not even get an allowance. While she smiled for cameras, the family bought cars, fine clothes, and big homes under her name. By the middle of the 1920s, her work had brought in a fortune. In today's money, it would be worth many millions. None of it sat in a trust for her future. There were no rules yet forcing parents to protect a child star's income. Legally, her earnings counted as theirs. Then the work dried up. A fight between her father and a producer shut off. New film offers. Studios moved on to other kids. The endorsements stopped. The tours ended. When the spotlight faded, the spending did not have a safety net behind it. As an adult, Diana Sarah Carey looked back at the numbers and found almost nothing left. The fortune her films built had been burned on lifestyle and bad choices. She had to start over in regular jobs while strangers remembered the child star who once lit up the screen. The parents who signed every deal had already had their share. The worker behind all of it was the only one left without a cushion. Jackie Coogan. And the Coogan Law. The courtroom in 1938 did not look like a Hollywood set. There were no cameras, no cute costumes, and no rehearsed lines. At one table sat Jackie Coogan, the former child star from The Kid. At the other sat his mother Lillian and his stepfather Arthur Bernstein. The fight in front of the judge was simple. Jackie wanted to know where his money had gone. As a child, he had been everywhere. Posters, newsreels, live tours, toys with his face on the box. Studios paid huge sums for his films. Reporters wrote that his earnings reached into the millions. Fans saw a smiling boy driving box office records. What they did not see was who handled his salary once it left the studio. The contracts listed Jackie as the star. The checks went to his parents' control. Lillian and Arthur spent freely on new houses, cars, staff, and parties. They said the money belonged to the family, not just to the boy on screen. There were no laws yet that forced them to set any part of it aside for their son's future. When Jackie reached adulthood, he expected a solid fortune waiting for him. Instead, he was told there was almost nothing left. Years of work and worldwide fame had turned into a few remaining assets and a long list of excuses. In public comments, his mother claimed the money had always been hers. She said no promises were made to give Jackie anything. That line became a turning point. The story of the broke child star hit newspapers across the country. People were shocked that a young actor could earn millions and still end up nearly empty-handed. The lawsuit dragged on, and in the end, Jackie recovered only a small fraction of what he had earned as a child. Lawmakers in California took notice. Hearings followed, with Jackie's story used as a main example of what could go wrong with child earnings. Shirley Temple's missing millions. By the mid-1930s, one curly-haired child carried a studio on her back. Shirley Temple danced, sang, and smiled through the Great Depression while adults counted the ticket sales. Films, sheet music, dolls, clothes, and lunchboxes all carried her name. The brand brought in serious money. Biographers report that her total earnings as a minor reached into the millions. Every deal ran through the Temple household. Her father, George Temple, handled the accounts and investments. Her mother, Gertrude, focused on training, costumes, and the image that studios wanted. Together, they managed the business of the most famous child in America. The girl at the center of it did the work, then went to bed while adults talked over contracts at the table. The studio checks did not go into a locked trust. There was no Coogan-style safeguard yet for her early peak years. Instead, the family moved into a large house, ran a fancy toy shop, and placed money into ventures that sounded exciting. Some projects failed. Some never really started. The Temple name drew crowds, but that did not turn bad deals into good ones. Years later, when Shirley reached legal adulthood, the numbers did not match the public image. Biographers describe a meeting where the young star sat down expecting a large personal fund. She found out that only a small fraction remained. Figures often cited are about $44,000 left from an estimated few million in gross earnings. For most people, that is a solid start in life. For the worker who had powered a studio, it was a shock. Shirley did not take her parents to court. She did not launch public attacks or splash angry quotes across newspapers. She kept a careful tone in interviews. In her own writing, she called the investments mismanaged and lost, not stolen. Still, the gap between what the public assumed and what actually sat in the bank was clear. Loretta Young and the Hidden Daughter. A quiet gap in Loretta Young's schedule in 1935 did not look strange to fans. Stars took breaks all the time. In this case, the pause hid a secret pregnancy. During the shoot for The Call of the Wild, Young and Clark Gable had an affair. She was Catholic, unmarried, and in a system where a pregnancy with a married co-star could crush a career. The solution was careful and planned. Young disappeared from public view, stayed out of sight until the baby arrived, then arranged for the child to be placed in an orphanage. Records later showed that she visited the infant girl there. The plan did not stop at that point. After about a year, the actress stepped forward and adopted the same child she had given birth to, presenting herself as a kind benefactor. The girl grew up as Judy Lewis. At home, she was told she was adopted. No one admitted that her adoptive mother and her biological mother were the same person. No one confirmed that Clark Gable was her father. Classmates and strangers still noticed the resemblance. Reporters joked about it in print. The family stayed quiet. Judy later wrote about life with Loretta. She described a loving but distant parent, very focused on image and control. One event stood out. As a child, Judy had ears that stuck out in a way that reminded people of Gable. When she was around 7, Young arranged surgery to pin them back. According to Judy, the goal was simple. The face in the mirror had to look less like the man on old film posters. The truth finally surfaced slowly. As an adult, Judy confronted the rumors, the half-answers, and the old photographs. She pressed for clear words. In later years, Young privately admitted that Gable was the father. Biographers and relatives backed that account. The secret that had shaped a whole childhood was no longer just a whispered story. Judy Garland's mother and the pills. On small-town stages, the Gum sisters looked like a family dream. Behind the curtain, their mother Ethel treated the act like a project that had to win. Frances, the youngest, had the strongest voice. She became the focus. Soon, the family left live circuits and moved closer to the studios. The girl, who would be Judy Garland, stepped into a system that fed on talent and never slept. Ethel booked shows, pushed rehearsals, and argued with agents. Biographers describe a parent who saw no point in rest if there was a chance to perform. When Judy started working long hours, fatigue hit hard. School, singing, travel, and early film tests meant late nights and early mornings. At that point, according to several historians, her mother began to use pills as tools. The routine was simple: stimulants to keep her going, sedatives to knock her out when she needed to sleep. Then MGM signed her. Studio doctors added their own supply. They worried about weight, skin, and energy more than about long-term health. Judy's schedule filled with music numbers, costume fittings, and retakes. Adults passed her tablets and expected her to smile. Coworkers later recalled that she would arrive on set wired, then crash during short breaks in her dressing room. The studio fitted her with caps on her teeth and bound her torso to reshape her figure. At home, the pressure did not ease. Her mother pushed her toward the next role, the next recording, the next tour. The line between home life and studio life blurred into one long workday. Judy grew older, but the pattern stayed in place. The pills did not stop when childhood ended. They became part of how she coped with stress, fear of failure, and sudden drops in income. In later interviews, she traced that dependence back to early years when adults decided what went into her body and when. Ethel kept defending her choices to friends. She said she was only doing what was needed to help her daughter succeed. Frances Farmer and her mother. One headline in 1942 said more than any studio poster, Frances Farmer was no longer just a rising actress. She was a public problem. Arrest reports and courtroom sketches replaced glossy portraits. At the center of the storm stood her mother, Lillian, with a pen and legal forms in her hand. Before the trouble, Farmer had been a sharp, independent performer. She earned praise for work at Paramount and clashed with executives over roles and publicity. Off-screen, she drank, argued, and broke rules. Traffic stops, disorderly conduct, and missed appointments built a record that worried officials and family members. A violent incident in California changed everything. Police took her into custody after a clash at a boarding house. A judge ordered psychiatric evaluation. Lillian stepped in and asked the court to declare her daughter incompetent. That request gave her power. With guardianship, she could sign papers that Frances did not want to sign herself. The next stop was Western State Hospital in Washington. Admission records show a series of treatments that were common at the time and harsh by modern standards. Doctors used insulin shock therapy and electroconvulsive therapy. Staff placed her in locked wards. For long stretches, she could not freely leave or make her own choices. Years later, a book claimed she also went through a lobotomy and even worse abuse inside the hospital. That story spread fast and turned her into a legend of cruelty. Researchers then looked at surviving files and interviewed staff. They found no medical proof of brain surgery. The author later admitted parts of the book were not strictly factual. The lobotomy tale now sits in the record as myth, not fact. The parts that remain confirmed are still grim. A mother gained legal control. A court backed that move. A grown woman spent years inside an institution where extreme treatments were routine. She was released and returned to her mother's house, then tried to rebuild a life and small jobs in local television. The legal order granting Lillian guardianship stayed on file until a later court finally restored full competence to Frances herself. Natalie Wood's stage mother. Natalie Wood was still in grade school when her mother decided acting was the plan. Maria Gurdon took her to casting calls, stood close to the director's chair, and pushed for any part that kept the family in front of studio people. The move from a simple home life to a Hollywood set started early and fast. Maria did not just encourage, she controlled. Biographers describe her watching every detail of Natalie's hair, clothes, and body language. Food was monitored. Weight stayed under constant comment. If a role called for a certain look, Maria adjusted her daughter to match it. Teachers, friends, and even family visits could be moved aside when a job turned up. One story has become the symbol of that control. During the shoot for Tomorrow is Forever, the script needed real tears from the child actor. Several accounts say Maria took her young daughter outside, found a butterfly, and tore it apart in front of her. Natalie went back in with a raw, shocked expression that the camera picked up at once. Biographers present this as one more sign that getting the scene was worth any emotional cost. Fear played a steady role in the household. Maria believed in fortune tellers and warnings, a prediction that Natalie should beware. Dark water turned into a rule that shaped trips, jobs, and even social events. According to family interviews, the mother repeated this warning often, using it to guide choices and to keep control over where her daughter went and who she saw. As Natalie grew older, the dynamic stayed tense. She wanted adult roles, private relationships, and normal time with friends. Maria kept pushing career and reputation. Biographical work and family comments show frequent conflicts over boyfriends, scripts, and contracts. The parent who had opened the door to Golden Age Hollywood did not let go when her child became a star in her own right. Bing Crosby's strict household. He sold comfort in every song that played on the radio. At home, his oldest son said life felt very different. In 1983, Gary Crosby released a memoir that pulled the family into headlines. He wrote that the famous singer ruled the house with a belt, harsh words, and rules that left little room for warmth. Gary's book described a clear pattern. Mistakes brought beatings on the bare backside. Silence at the table was expected. Grades, posture, and manners were checked with the same care Bing used for his studio sessions. According to the memoir, the punishments were not rare. They came often enough that the boys lived in steady fear of the next strike. The details stood out. Gary said his father used metal-tipped belts. He claimed that punishments happened even for small slips, such as minor messes or clumsy moves in front of guests. The picture he drew on the page showed a parent focused on control more than on comfort. Readers who had grown up with Christmas specials and soft ballads were stunned. Other family members did not accept this version of events. Bing's younger sons, such as Philip and his second wife Catherine, gave interviews that pushed back. They agreed he could be strict. They described him as a man shaped by his own hard upbringing, careful with money and behavior. They denied that he crossed the line into constant cruelty. For them, the memoir inflated rare moments into a full story. Biographers then stepped in and tried to balance the record. They noted that Gary had his own problems, including alcohol dependence and career struggles. They also pointed to letters and notes that showed Bing worrying about the boys, sending advice, and trying to provide chances. The result on paper is a mixed portrait. One son alleges a pattern of abuse. Others say the discipline was firm but not sadistic. Joan Crawford's Mommy Dearest allegations. Christina Crawford published her book Mommy Dearest in 1978 and flipped one Hollywood image on its head. The woman the public knew as Joan Crawford, polished star of the 1930s and 1940s, became in that memoir a terrifying mother behind closed doors. The claims in the book were specific, personal, and explosive. Christina wrote that her adoptive mother used beatings as discipline. She described nights when she was dragged from bed and punished over small issues, such as messy closets or unfinished chores. She alleged that Joan's moods shifted fast, especially when alcohol was involved, and that the children never knew when the next burst of rage might start. The book detailed strict rules about food, clothes, and posture. Christina claimed that Joan monitored every tiny act, from how the children sat at the table to how they addressed guests. One story described bathroom floors being scrubbed in the middle of the night after Joan found a spot of water. Another described clothes thrown out if they were not aligned to the exact standard she wanted. The most famous image is tied to hangers in the closet. Christina wrote about an incident where Joan discovered wire hangers in place of padded ones and exploded in fury. The film version later turned that moment into a screaming scene that shaped public memory. It is important to note that the film added its own style and did not serve as a documentary record. Not everyone agreed with Christina's portrait. Joan's other adopted daughters, Kathy and Cindy, publicly rejected the book. They said their mother could be demanding and dramatic, but they denied the pattern of constant abuse. Friends and some colleagues also spoke up, describing Joan as strict, proud, and image-conscious, not the monster shown in the memoir. Biographers split on the issue. Some see Mommy Dearest as a valuable account of life with a powerful, unstable parent. Others point out that it is a single point of view shaped by long-term conflict and resentment. No court case ever tested the claims. No official investigation produced a ruling on what happened in that house. Patty Duke and the Ross Guardians. Before the Academy Award and the television fame, Patty Duke's life ran through a Queens apartment and two managers named John and Ethel Ross. Her birth name was Anna Marie Duke. Her mother struggled with money and health. The Rosses stepped in as agents, then as full-time guardians, and soon acted like parents in everything but biology. They moved her into their home. They changed her name to Patty Duke. They shaped her voice, her manner, and the way she answered questions. In her memoir, Call Me Anna, she wrote that they controlled her food, her clothes, and even her mood. Phone calls with her real family were limited or supervised. Trips out of the apartment centered almost entirely on work. According to Patty's account, the Rosses also introduced her to pills and alcohol when she was still very young. She described uppers to keep her going through long rehearsal days and downers to force sleep when the schedule allowed no rest. That pattern carried into her teen years as she took on harder roles, such as the part in The Miracle Worker that earned her an Oscar. The most serious allegations in her book concerned sexual and physical abuse. Patty wrote that John Ross and at times Ethel crossed boundaries that should never be crossed with a minor in their care. She described groping, coercion, and constant verbal attacks that cut down her confidence. She presented these details as key reasons for later mental health crises and trust problems. Money formed another piece of the pattern. As her fame grew, so did her paychecks. The Rosses had power over those funds. Patty later said that when she finally gained control of her own finances, much of what she had earned was gone. She claimed that they spent freely and left her with far less than years of hard work should have built. They told her she wasn't pretty enough, soft enough, or ordinary enough for Hollywood. Angelica Houston proved them all wrong, and in doing so, changed the game forever. The Hollywood mold before Houston. Before Angelica Houston left her mark, Hollywood's leading ladies fit into a tightly controlled image. Studios set strict standards for femininity. Blonde hair, flawless skin, petite frames, and perfectly symmetrical features. Stars like Grace Kelly and Audrey Hepburn embodied these ideals. Elegant, graceful, and composed, they were cast as romantic interests, homemakers, or damsels in distress. Their roles rarely offered depth or independence. Studio executives held all the power. They dictated every detail of an actress's life. Contracts demanded strict diets and beauty routines. Marilyn Monroe's rise in the 1950s highlighted this obsession. Her platinum hair, soft voice, and fragile image weren't natural. They were carefully crafted by studio handlers. Behind the glamorous facade, actresses endured relentless pressure, invasive scrutiny, and the constant threat of being replaced by someone younger, thinner, or blonder. Those who didn't fit the mold were sidelined or given minor roles. The films reinforced these ideals. Audrey Hepburn's Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1961, gave viewers a quirky, rebellious woman. Yet Holly Golightly's rough edges were softened to appeal to mainstream audiences. Actresses like Elizabeth Taylor and Vivien Leigh took on more complex characters, but even their roles were sanitized to align with societal norms. Hollywood rewarded conformity and punished rebellion. Some women refused to stay in the box. Bette Davis and Katharine Hepburn were unapologetically bold, often clashing with studio bosses. Davis even sued Warner Brothers to fight for better roles, a move that earned her the label of difficult. Hepburn's androgynous style and assertive attitude brought constant criticism, yet their talent kept them in the spotlight, forcing Hollywood to make room for their defiance. By the 1970s, cracks began to appear in this rigid system. The counterculture and second-wave feminism demanded more authentic storytelling. Audiences wanted realism, but the change was slow. Actresses were still expected to meet impossible standards. Then came Houston, a presence so distinct she would challenge Hollywood's idea of the perfect leading lady. Born into Hollywood royalty, Angelica Houston entered the world surrounded by artistry and chaos. Born in 1951, she was the daughter of renowned filmmaker John Huston and ballerina Enrica Soma. From the beginning, her life was anything but ordinary. The family's time was split between California, New York, and a sprawling estate in Galway, Ireland. The Irish estate wasn't just a home, it was a cultural hub. Artists, writers, and actors gathered there, creating an atmosphere brimming with creativity. Marlon Brando, Pablo Picasso, and Ernest Hemingway were frequent visitors, their larger-than-life personalities shaping Houston's worldview. She grew up listening to their conversations, absorbing their ideas, and learning to navigate the intense energy of these towering figures. Her father, John Huston, was a force of nature, known for directing cinematic landmarks like The Maltese Falcon, 1941, and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948. He was a genius, but also a volatile presence. John was deeply committed to storytelling and the arts, but he demanded excellence. His expectations often bordered on perfectionism, creating a relationship filled with both inspiration and tension. Huston later admitted that her father's brilliance both captivated and intimidated her. His fiery temper left its mark, shaping her lifelong struggles with seeking approval while forging her independence. Her mother, Enrica Soma, provided a different kind of influence. As a ballerina, Soma embodied elegance and grace. Unlike John's intensity, Soma's presence was calming and nurturing. She introduced Huston to the beauty of movement and artistry without the sharp edges of her father's critiques. Tragically, Soma's life was cut short in a car accident in 1969. Huston was only 18 at the time. The loss devastated her, leaving her to navigate early adulthood with a heavy burden of grief. It was a turning point that forced her to grow up quickly and confront the fragility of life. In her late teens, Huston began searching for her own identity. She moved to London and found herself drawn to the world of high fashion. Her striking, unconventional beauty made her a standout in the industry. Huston appeared in Vogue and collaborated with legendary photographers like Richard Avedon. She quickly became a muse for the fashion elite. Yet, the industry's relentless focus on physical perfection left her disillusioned. The obsession with appearances felt shallow and constraining, echoing the rigid standards she had seen in Hollywood. This disillusionment pushed Huston to reevaluate her path. She began noticing parallels between the modeling world and the entertainment industry she had grown up around. Both demanded conformity. Both valued image over substance. For Huston, this realization became a turning point. She decided to leave modeling behind and return to acting. This time, however, she approached it with a new resolve. She wouldn't rely on her family name or connections. Huston wanted to make her mark on her own terms. Early struggles and modeling career. At 18, Anjelica Huston made her acting debut in A Walk with Love and Death, 1969. Directed by her father, John Huston, it seemed like a perfect launchpad into stardom. Instead, it became a humbling experience. Critics panned the film, calling it uneven and uninspired. Huston's performance didn't fare much better. She later admitted, "I was out of my depth," likening the experience to playing dress-up rather than serious acting. The failure stung, but it made one thing clear: she couldn't rely on her father's name to define her career. Huston turned to modeling, where she quickly made an impact. By the early 1970s, her striking and unconventional beauty drew the attention of the fashion elite. Her sharp cheekbones, piercing eyes, and statuesque frame set her apart in an industry dominated by soft, traditional beauty. Celebrated photographers like Helmut Newton and Bob Richardson captured her distinctive look, which was often described as powerful and androgynous. Huston's unique presence aligned perfectly with the avant-garde trends of the era. She became a favorite of Vogue and worked with top designers like Halston. Her face appeared on countless runways and in high-fashion editorials. Despite her success, the modeling world left her unsatisfied. Its focus on physical perfection felt hollow. Years later, she reflected, "It was just another form of the same thing." The superficiality reminded her of Hollywood's rigid standards. Both industries seemed obsessed with surfaces, leaving little room for depth or individuality. In the late 1970s, Huston moved to New York City. There, everything changed. Immersing herself in the city's vibrant art scene, she found inspiration among visionaries like Andy Warhol and the eclectic crowd at Studio 54. The city's energy was intoxicating. It offered freedom, creativity, and a stark contrast to the controlled world she had known in Hollywood and fashion. New York reignited her passion for acting, but this time she approached it on her own terms. A defining role. By the early 1980s, Anjelica Huston was ready to act again. This time, she had a plan. She wanted roles that pushed her, ones that made an impact. Her comeback began with a supporting part in The Postman Always Rings Twice, 1981. The film, a remake of the classic noir, starred Jack Nicholson and Jessica Lange. Huston played Madge, a fiercely independent woman. The role was small, but Huston made it unforgettable. Madge wasn't meant to be a standout character. Huston changed that. She gave the role depth and defiance. Critics took notice. They called her performance raw and unfiltered. Even among the bigger stars, Huston's intensity stood out. She didn't fit Hollywood's polished image of leading ladies. Instead, she brought an edge, something authentic and real. Her on-screen energy mirrored her off-screen persona. She didn't charm her way into the spotlight, she commanded it. This film also marked a turning point in Huston's personal life. She and Jack Nicholson had met before, but during The Postman Always Rings Twice, their connection grew. They began a romance that quickly became the talk of Hollywood. Their chemistry was undeniable, but their relationship was anything but smooth. It was fiery, unpredictable, and often dramatic. Huston refused to be overshadowed by Nicholson. She wouldn't let their relationship define her. His magnetic personality didn't eclipse hers. Her independence added to her mystique. She wasn't just someone's girlfriend. She was carving out her own space, both in Hollywood and in life. Her performance in The Postman Always Rings Twice was more than a comeback. It was a statement. Houston wasn't interested in following Hollywood's rules. She wanted to break them. This role gave a glimpse of what was to come. Bigger, bolder roles were on the horizon, and Houston was ready to claim them. Reinvention in Prizzi's honor. Her breakout came in Prizzi's Honor, 1985, a dark mafia comedy directed by her father, John Huston. She played Melrose Prizzi, the ambitious daughter of a powerful crime family. Melrose wasn't like most female characters of the time. She wasn't sweet or moral. She was cunning, flawed, and unapologetically human. Huston brought the character to life with layers of strength and vulnerability, making her unforgettable. Critics loved her performance. They praised the depth she gave a role that could have been flat. Even with a cast that included Jack Nicholson and Kathleen Turner, Huston stood out. She later said the role helped her explore parts of herself she hadn't shown on screen before. It was a turning point. Her work didn't just earn praise, it made history. Huston won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, becoming the first in her famous family to take home an Oscar. The win was a triumph, but it was also complicated. Huston admitted it felt like a double-edged sword. While the award validated her talent, it also tied her even more closely to her father's legacy. What made her role as Melrose so groundbreaking wasn't just how well she played it, it was what the character stood for. Melrose broke the mold of a typical leading lady. She wasn't polished or morally righteous. She was manipulative, calculating, and deeply flawed. But she was also captivating. Audiences connected with her because she felt real. The Oscar win didn't just solidify Huston's place in Hollywood. It marked her transformation into a force of her own. She wasn't just John Huston's daughter or Jack Nicholson's partner anymore. The Gothic leading lady. In 1991, Angelica Houston took on a role that would redefine her career. Morticia Addams in The Addams Family. Morticia wasn't your typical leading lady. She was dark, mysterious, and unapologetically unique. For Huston, it was a perfect match. Her striking looks and natural presence made her the ideal choice. Morticia was a character who embraced her quirks, and Huston brought her to life in a way that felt authentic and iconic. Playing Morticia wasn't just about acting. Huston underwent a dramatic physical transformation. Heavy prosthetics helped create Morticia's eerie, flawless appearance. Tape was used to lift her eyes, and exaggerated cheekbones gave her a sculptural, almost otherworldly look. Huston described the process as exhausting but rewarding. "It was like wearing a mask," she said. Yet instead of hiding behind the makeup, she used it to enhance Morticia's personality. Her portrayal of Morticia was nuanced and layered. Huston combined deadpan humor with warmth and sensuality. Morticia wasn't just a mother or a wife, she was a force of nature. Her relationship with Gomez Addams, played by Raul Julia, stood out. Their chemistry lit up the screen. Their marriage, filled with passion and mutual respect, broke away from outdated romantic tropes. Morticia and Gomez felt modern, even revolutionary, in how they complemented each other as equals. The film was a hit, and Huston's performance received widespread praise. Audiences adored Morticia, making her a cultural icon. When Addams Family Values 1993 premiered, Huston's Morticia was even more confident and magnetic. Her sharp wit and commanding presence made her a standout in every scene. Morticia became more than just a character. She represented empowerment for anyone who didn't fit Hollywood's narrow expectations. Off-screen persona and public perception. Her life off-screen was as complex as her characters on screen. Her long-term relationship with Jack Nicholson became one of Hollywood's most infamous romances. It spanned the 1970s and 1980s, filled with passion and drama. Their connection was intense, but it was far from peaceful. Nicholson's infidelity caused constant turbulence. Huston, however, refused to be cast as a victim. In her memoir, she called their relationship complicated. She acknowledged their love but didn't shy away from its flaws. Despite the chaos, Huston stayed fiercely independent. She didn't let her romantic life overshadow her work. When the relationship ended in the late 1980s, she emerged stronger. Her image as a resilient, self-assured woman remained intact. Houston's honesty set her apart. In interviews, she was candid about her struggles. She talked openly about battling self-doubt, living under the weight of her father's legacy, and grieving her mother's early death. This vulnerability made her relatable. Fans admired her for speaking her truth in an industry where stars often stayed guarded. Her intelligence and sharp wit only added to her mystique. Her style became another way she expressed herself. Houston chose bold, avant-garde fashion over Hollywood's predictable glam. Designers like Halston, Yves Saint Laurent, and Valentino adored her. She made daring choices look effortless. On red carpets or in fashion shoots, she exuded confidence. Pioneering complex female characters. Angelica Houston built her career by shattering stereotypes. She chose roles that defied Hollywood's shallow portrayals of women, bringing complexity and depth to every performance. In 1990, she delivered two standout roles that proved her range. In The Witches, 1990, Houston played the Grand High Witch, a villain dripping with menace and theatrical flair. Adapted from Roald Dahl's beloved book, the character could have been a simple antagonist. Houston, however, turned her into something unforgettable. She balanced humor and terror, making the Grand High Witch both captivating and chilling. Scenes like her dramatic unmasking, revealing the grotesque witch underneath, cemented her place as a childhood nightmare for many. The makeup process was grueling, but Houston brought the character to life with charisma and boldness. Fans loved her. Kids feared her. The Grand High Witch became one of her most iconic roles. That same year, Houston delivered a completely different performance in The Grifters. She played Lily Dillon, a con artist with a complicated relationship with her son, portrayed by John Cusack. Lily was manipulative and ruthless, but also deeply vulnerable. Houston's portrayal made her more than just a hardened criminal. She brought layers to the character, showing flashes of love and regret beneath the toughness. Critics called her performance one of her best. It earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. Houston's acting style wasn't about glamour or charm. She leaned into her character's flaws, contradictions, and raw humanity. This honesty set her apart in an industry obsessed with polished perfection. Directors noticed. Wes Anderson later cast her as the matriarch in The Royal Tenenbaums, 2001, a role that showcased her ability to bring quiet strength to even the quirkiest of stories. Advocacy for women in film. In interviews, Angelica Houston called out double standards, especially the industry's obsession with youth and beauty. Houston criticized how actresses were cast aside as they aged, while male actors kept leading roles well into their later years. "They want you to disappear after 40, she said, exposing one of Hollywood's most glaring inequities. Her advocacy wasn't just talk. Houston actively worked to create opportunities for women in film. She collaborated with groundbreaking directors like Agnès Varda, a pioneer of the French New Wave. Their work together, including the short film 101 Nights, 1995, was part of Houston's broader mission to amplify female voices in a male-dominated industry. She also tackled the issue of pay disparities, speaking out long before it became a widely discussed topic. Years ahead of the Me Too movement and conversations about wage equity, Houston was already pushing for fairness. Her outspokenness wasn't always welcomed. Hollywood labeled her difficult, a word often used to silence women who challenge the system. Houston didn't care. She refused to hold back her critiques, even if it made her unpopular. She believed in pushing for progress no matter the cost. Houston's courage inspired younger actresses to stand up for themselves. Stars like Tilda Swinton and Frances McDormand, known for breaking beauty standards and embracing unconventional roles, followed paths Houston helped pave. Houston's nonconformity. In Ever After, 1998, Angelica Houston played Baroness Rodmilla de Ghent, the wicked stepmother. The role could have been flatly evil or cartoonish, but Houston added depth. She made Rodmilla cruel, yet human. Critics praised her for creating a character that was both detestable and strangely sympathetic. It was a perfect example of how Houston could elevate even the most familiar roles. This commitment to authenticity defined her work. Houston didn't just tell stories on screen, she shared her own through her memoirs. A Story Lately Told, 2013, and Watch Me, 2014, offered raw, unfiltered glimpses into her life. She wrote about growing up in a bohemian Hollywood family, navigating fame, and battling self-doubt. Her openness about her struggles resonated with readers. It reinforced her image as someone who never hid from the truth. Off-screen, Houston continued to challenge industry norms. She stayed true to her bold, distinctive style. Whether in couture or understated elegance, her fashion choices reflected her individuality. She rejected Hollywood's obsession with youth and glamour, showing that authenticity was more powerful than conformity. Houston's refusal to conform didn't just change how people viewed leading ladies. It reshaped the stories Hollywood told. Filmmakers began creating roles with complexity and moral ambiguity. Houston had shown that audiences were ready for characters who felt real, not polished. Actresses like Tilda Swinton and Cate Blanchett followed her lead, taking on roles that celebrated individuality over tradition. Houston proved that being different was an asset, not a weakness. By embracing her uniqueness, she thrived in an industry known for its harshness. Her career opened doors for others, encouraging filmmakers to tell richer, more daring stories. Houston didn't just break the mold, she created a new one. These aren't just rumors. They are the stories of 10 famous fathers. Their secret relationships led to the birth of illicit love children. Their actions rocked families and shocked the public. Each name on this list holds a tale of secrecy, betrayal, and unexpected revelations. Jack Nicholson, the enigmatic legend's hidden daughter. One of Hollywood's most enigmatic figures had a closely guarded secret. In 1981, Danish model Winnie Hallman gave birth to Honey Hallman. Jack Nicholson was the father. The affair began while Jack was still involved with actress Angelica Houston. Jack's relationship with Winnie was brief but intense. For years, Honey's existence was a secret. Jack did not publicly acknowledge her until much later. Honey grew up in Denmark, away from the Hollywood spotlight. She was raised primarily by her mother, Winnie. Despite the secrecy, Jack financially supported Honey and stayed in touch. In a rare interview, Jack spoke about fatherhood. Children give your life a resonance that it can't have without them. However, he rarely mentioned Honey publicly. Jack's public persona was that of a bachelor and ladies' man, which added to the intrigue surrounding his private life. Honey's existence became more widely known in the 1990s. She made a brief foray into acting, appearing in Danish films and TV shows. Despite her father's fame, Honey kept a low profile. She chose a life away from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Jack's other children, Lorraine and Ray, from his relationship with Rebecca Broussard, were more publicly known. Honey, however, remained a lesser-known part of Jack's family. The dynamic was complex, with Honey having a different upbringing compared to her half-siblings, Warren Beatty, the Casanovas' surprise son. Renowned for his charm and numerous romantic entanglements, Warren Beatty's personal life has often been the subject of intrigue and speculation. Among his many relationships, his role as a father stands out, particularly his relationship with his transgender son, Stephen Ira Beatty. Stephen Ira Beatty was born to Warren Beatty and Annette Bening on January 8, 1992. Beatty and Bening, both acclaimed actors, have a long-standing and stable marriage, which contrasts sharply with Beatty's earlier reputation as a Hollywood playboy. Their relationship began on the set of the film Bugsy, and they married in 1992, the same year Stephen was born. Stephen Ira came out as transgender in his late teens. Since then, he has been an outspoken advocate for transgender rights and a prominent voice in the LGBTQ+ community. Stephen's activism focuses on the intersections of trans identity, feminism, and social justice. He has written extensively on these topics and has been involved in various advocacy projects and organizations. Annette Bening has also been vocal in her support for Stephen. She has spoken about the importance of accepting and supporting transgender children, sharing insights from her experience as a mother. Benning's advocacy work complements her son's efforts, and together they have contributed to raising awareness about transgender issues. Stephen grew up largely out of the public eye, thanks to his parents' efforts to protect their children from the intense scrutiny of Hollywood. Besides Stephen, Beatty and Benning have 3 other children, Benjamin, Isabel, and Ella. The family maintains a close-knit and private life, focusing on supporting one another and their individual pursuits. Anthony Quinn, the classic actor's illicit offspring. Celebrated for his powerful performances in films such as Zorba the Greek and Lawrence of Arabia, Anthony Quinn had a dramatic personal life that mirrored his on-screen roles. In the late 1960s, Quinn fathered a daughter, Valentina, with his secretary, Jolanda Adalori, while still married to his second wife, Iolanda Quinn. Quinn's relationship with Jolanda Adalori began during a period of marital strife. Despite his public image as a devoted family man, Quinn's affair with his secretary was an open secret among his close associates. Valentina's birth in 1969 was kept under wraps, with Quinn providing financial support and maintaining a discreet relationship with her and her mother. Valentina grew up largely away from the spotlight. Raised primarily by Jolanda, she enjoyed a comfortable upbringing funded by Quinn's contributions. Despite the secrecy, he made efforts to be a part of Valentina's life, often visiting her privately and ensuring her needs were met. In a 1990 interview, Quinn spoke cryptically about his many children, saying, "I have loved deeply and passionately, and my children are my legacy." This statement was one of the few public acknowledgments of his complex family dynamics. His public acknowledgment of Valentina came much later in life as he sought to reconcile with all his children. Valentina chose a life away from Hollywood, focusing on her personal and professional development. Despite the complex circumstances of her birth, she maintained a respectful relationship with her father. The secrecy surrounding her existence was a protective measure, intended to shield her from the intense scrutiny that came with Quinn's fame. Iolanda Quinn, Anthony's wife, was aware of Valentina's existence but chose to remain publicly silent about it. Their marriage endured despite the affair, with Iolanda often accompanying Quinn to public events. The dynamics of their relationship were complex, shaped by the pressures of Quinn's career and personal indiscretions. Anthony Quinn's other children from his marriages were more publicly known. His sons, Francesco and Lorenzo Quinn, followed in their father's footsteps, pursuing careers in acting and the arts. Valentina, however, remained a lesser-known part of Quinn's extended family, her existence only becoming widely known much later. Rod Stewart, rock legend's secret daughter. The British rock legend, known for hits like Maggie May and Do You Think I'm Sexy, fathered a secret daughter at a young age. In 1963, when Stewart was just 18 years old, he had a brief relationship with Susanna Boffey, a young art student. From this relationship, Sarah Streeter was born. Due to their youth and lack of resources, Stewart and Boffey decided to give Sarah up for adoption. Stewart's burgeoning music career and Boffey's uncertain future led to this difficult decision. Sarah was adopted by a loving family and grew up unaware of her famous parentage. Stewart's career took off in the late 1960s and 1970s, propelling him to international stardom. Despite his public success, the memory of his first daughter remained with him. In a 2007 interview, Stewart spoke candidly about the decision. "Giving up Sarah was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was the best decision for her at the time." Sarah's existence remained a closely guarded secret for many years. It wasn't until the early 1980s that she learned about her biological parents. After discovering her true parentage, Sarah sought to reconnect with Stewart. Their reunion was initially awkward, but gradually became more comfortable as they built a relationship. Stewart's public acknowledgement of Sarah came in the late 1980s. He expressed regret over the years they had lost, but showed a deep commitment to making up for lost time. "I've been given a second chance to be a father to Sarah, and I'm not going to waste it," Stewart stated in an interview with Rolling Stone. Sarah, who grew up in a stable and loving adoptive family, approached the reunion with caution. She had built her own life and was wary of the media attention that came with being Stewart's daughter. Over time, she and Stewart developed a strong bond, marked by mutual respect and understanding. Stewart's other children from his various relationships were more publicly known, including Kimberly and Sean from his marriage to Alana Hamilton. The addition of Sarah to the family dynamic brought a new dimension to Stewart's life. Despite the complexities, Stewart embraced his role as Sarah's father. Mick Jagger, Rolling Stones' hidden son. The charismatic lead singer of the Rolling Stones is no stranger to controversy. His flamboyant lifestyle and numerous relationships have often made headlines. One of the most notable secrets in his personal life is his son, Lucas, born from an affair with Brazilian model and TV host Luciana Gimenez. In 1998, Jagger was still in a relationship with model Jerry Hall when he met Luciana Gimenez. Their affair was kept hidden from the public eye. In May 1999, Luciana gave birth to Lucas Maurice Murad Jagger. The revelation of Lucas's existence sent shockwaves through the media, as Jagger had to publicly acknowledge the child amidst his highly publicized relationship with Hall. The birth of Lucas marked the end of Jagger's relationship with Hall, who filed for divorce shortly after learning about the affair. The media frenzy surrounding the scandal was intense, with Jagger's private life becoming tabloid fodder. Despite the chaos, Jagger took responsibility for Lucas, providing financial support and ensuring his involvement in the child's life. Jagger's relationship with Luciana Gimenez remained cordial for the sake of their son. Lucas was raised primarily in Brazil, away from the intense scrutiny of the British and American media. Jagger frequently visited Lucas, ensuring they maintained a strong bond despite the geographical distance. In interviews, Luciana often spoke positively about Jagger's role as a father, emphasizing his commitment to Lucas. Lucas grew up aware of his father's fame but led a relatively private life. He occasionally appeared in public with Jagger, particularly at family events and gatherings. Lucas's presence highlighted the complex family dynamics Jagger navigated, balancing his role as a father with his rock star lifestyle. Jagger's other children, including Jade, Georgia May, and James, were more publicly recognized. The addition of Lucas to the family brought a new dynamic, with Jagger striving to integrate all his children. The complexity of Jagger's personal life often mirrored the tumultuous nature of his career, filled with highs and lows. Lucas has embraced his mixed heritage, often traveling between Brazil and the UK. He has expressed pride in his father's legacy while carving out his own identity. In a rare interview, Lucas mentioned, "I love my dad and I'm proud of him. We have a great relationship and that's what matters most." Steven Tyler, rock star's hidden daughter. The dynamic frontman of Aerosmith led a life that epitomized the rock and roll lifestyle, filled with excesses and tumultuous relationships. One of the most compelling stories from his personal life is that of his hidden daughter, Liv Tyler. Born in 1977, Liv's true parentage was kept secret for many years. Liv was the result of Tyler's brief relationship with model and singer Bebe Buell. At the time of Liv's birth, Buell was in a relationship with musician Todd Rundgren. To protect Liv from Steven's notorious lifestyle and substance abuse issues, Buell and Rundgren decided to raise Liv as Todd's daughter. Liv grew up believing Todd was her biological father. The truth about Liv's parentage began to unravel when she was around 9 years old. During a concert, she noticed a striking resemblance between herself and Mia Tyler, Steven's other daughter. This observation led to questions and eventually the revelation of her true father's identity. Liv was introduced to Steven Tyler and gradually built a relationship with him. Steven's reaction to discovering Liv as his daughter was one of joy and determination to be part of her life. Despite the initial shock, he embraced his role as her father. In a 1997 interview, Steven said, "It was a moment of realizing that something wonderful had come out of my crazy life. Liv is my daughter, and I love her." Liv, who would go on to become a successful actress and model, navigated her complex family dynamics with grace. She maintained close relationships with both Todd Rundgren, who had been a father figure throughout her childhood, and Steven Tyler. Liv's upbringing, marked by these dual paternal influences, shaped her into a grounded and resilient individual. Stephen and Liv's relationship flourished over the years. They were often seen together at public events, and Liv frequently spoke about her father with affection and respect. "He's a wonderful man and a loving father," Liv mentioned in a 2001 interview. Their bond was evident in both their public appearances and private moments. Stephen's other children, including Mia and Chelsea Tyler, were part of this blended family dynamic. The integration of Liv into Stephen's life added a unique dimension to his role as a father. Despite the unconventional beginnings, the family forged strong connections, emphasizing love and support. Jude Law, the heartthrob's unexpected news. As a British actor known for his roles in films like The Talented Mr. Ripley and Sherlock Holmes, he found himself in the spotlight not just for his acting prowess but also for his complex personal life. In 2009, Law's affair with American model Samantha Burke resulted in the birth of a daughter, Sophia. Law, already a father to 3 children with his ex-wife, Sadie Frost, was thrust into a media frenzy when the news of Samantha's pregnancy broke. The revelation came as a surprise, and Law publicly acknowledged his responsibility, stating, "I can confirm that following a relationship last year, I have been advised by Miss Burke that she is having a child." Samantha Burke, a model and aspiring actress, met Law while he was filming in New York. Their brief relationship resulted in the birth of Sophia in September 2009. Despite the brevity of their affair, Law took steps to ensure that he fulfilled his responsibilities as a father. Law's public acknowledgement of Sophia marked a significant moment in his personal life. He arranged for financial support and took legal steps to formalize his role in Sophia's upbringing. The media closely followed the story, fascinated by the juxtaposition of Law's public charm and his private responsibilities. Sophia was raised primarily by her mother in Florida, away from the intense scrutiny of the British press. Law made efforts to visit and maintain a relationship with his daughter, balancing his career and fatherhood. The dynamic was challenging, but both parents prioritized Sophia's well-being. Law's other children, Rafferty, Iris, and Rudy, were more accustomed to the public eye due to their father's fame. The addition of Sophia to the family added a new layer of complexity to Law's role as a father. He strived to integrate all his children into his life, ensuring that each felt valued and loved. Ryan Philippe, the teen idol's secret daughter. Known for his roles in Cruel Intentions and I Know What You Did Last Summer, he found himself at the center of a personal revelation in 2011. Philippe fathered a daughter, Kai Knapp, with actress Alexis Knapp. The news of Kai's birth was kept low profile initially, surprising many fans and media alike. Felipe's relationship with Alexis Knapp was brief, occurring after his high-profile divorce from actress Reese Witherspoon, with whom he has 2 children, Ava and Deacon. The relationship between Philippe and Knapp ended before Kai's birth, but the actor remained involved in the pregnancy. Kai was born in July 2011, and Philippe's initial reaction to the pregnancy news was supportive. Despite their split, Philippe attended doctor appointments and prepared for Kai's arrival. In a 2012 interview, Knapp said, "Ryan has been very supportive, and we're both focused on doing what's best for Kai." Felipe's dedication to Kai was evident from the beginning. He ensured that Kai received financial support and was actively involved in her life, despite not being in a relationship with Knapp. The actor balanced his responsibilities to Kai with his commitments to his older children, Ava and Deacon. Felipe's public acknowledgement of Kai was a significant moment. He was often seen with his children, demonstrating his commitment to being a present father. In interviews, Philippe spoke about the joys and challenges of fatherhood, saying, "Being a father is the most rewarding thing. It's about being there for your kids, no matter what." Liam Gallagher, the Oasis star's illicit child. The iconic frontman of the British rock band. Oasis is known for his tumultuous personal life as much as his musical career. In 1998, Gallagher fathered a daughter, Molly Moorish, with singer Lisa Moorish while he was still married to actress Patsy Kensit. Gallagher's affair with Lisa Moorish occurred during a particularly volatile period in his life. Despite being married to Kensett, Gallagher's relationship with Moorish led to the birth of Molly, a secret kept from the public for several years. The affair and Molly's existence added to Gallagher's already controversial public persona. Lisa Moorish, a singer known for her work in the British music scene, kept a relatively low profile about her relationship with Gallagher. Molly was raised primarily by her mother away from the public eye. Despite the secrecy, Gallagher provided financial support for Molly and made efforts to be part of her life. Gallagher's relationship with Molly remained largely private for many years. In interviews, he rarely spoke about her, focusing instead on his career and his other children, Lennon and Jean, from his marriages to Patsy Kensett and Nicole Appleton, respectively. The public only became aware of Molly when she was a teenager, as she began to make appearances alongside her father. Molly's relationship with Gallagher evolved over time. Despite the initial distance, they developed a closer bond as she grew older. Molly, who inherited her father's musical talent and charisma, began to forge her own path in the entertainment industry. Lisa Moorish's decision to protect Molly from the public eye proved crucial in her upbringing. Moorish maintained a respectful distance from the media frenzy surrounding Gallagher, ensuring that Molly had a stable and nurturing environment. This approach allowed Molly to grow up with a sense of normalcy despite her father's fame. Ray Charles, the music legend's secret children. The legendary musician, known for his groundbreaking contributions to soul, jazz, and blues, had a complex personal life that extended beyond his illustrious career. Charles fathered 12 children with 10 different women, many of whom were kept from the public eye. Among these, his relationships with Sandra Jean Betts and Mary Ann Denbach were particularly notable for the secrecy surrounding them. In the 1960s, Charles was at the height of his career, but his personal life was marked by numerous affairs. His relationship with Sandra Jean Betts resulted in the birth of a son, Vincent Kochunian. This relationship was kept under wraps, with Charles providing financial support while maintaining a discreet involvement in Vincent's life. Similarly, his affair with Mary Ann Denbach, a backup singer, led to the birth of a daughter, Sheila Ray Charles. Mary Ann and Sheila lived a relatively quiet life away from the media's prying eyes, with Charles ensuring their financial stability and occasionally visiting them. Sheila Ray Charles, who followed in her father's musical footsteps, eventually spoke about her relationship with Ray. In a 2005 interview, she revealed, "My father and I had a complicated relationship. He wasn't always there, but he made sure we were taken care of. I loved him dearly, despite the distance." Charles's other children, including Ray Charles Robinson Jr. and Robert Robinson, were more publicly known due to their involvement in his musical legacy. In a 2006 interview, Ray Charles Jr. reflected on his father's legacy, saying, "He was a complicated man, but he loved us in his way. We're all part of his story, and we carry his legacy forward."